Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I hope we are going to enjoy the session. Just focus, relax, and then watch the proceedings as we go on. Now, if we look at today's business, it's nothing else but Anna. And I hope yesterday your learners did well when they wrote Anna. I'll be taking you through the paper and the memorandum, and hopefully after discussion everybody will be on the same level and we shall be speaking the same language. Let's see what we have for the day. Let me start off by saying I am Letswara. I am the chief marker for grade 6 English FAL, and I will be taking you through accordingly. Now, for this exercise, you will need to have your question paper and the memorandum. But before we start with the real business, I'll take you through the important aspects that we must consider before we start. Now, if you check, the purpose of the day will be to ensure common understanding of the marking process by all markers. Secondly, to ensure that uniformity and consistency are maintained by all of us throughout our province, Free State, and thus throughout the country. The third purpose would be to improve the quality of the marking standard by all teachers. So if we can really achieve this at the end of the whole process, we shall have really done well. Now, the following principles will be very key as we go on with our marking. Now, remember, every mark that you give to your learner must be accounted for. No marking out of pity. Unfortunately, here we have just to follow the given criteria. A learner will be given what he or she deserves. Again, remember, you have to be accurate throughout the marking process as you mark. And then thirdly, remember, the memorandum has to be strictly adhered to. This is the memorandum that was released from the national level. All innovations, improvements were made there, so we cannot afford to change the memorandum at this level. Then we will definitely have deviated from the memorandum. So strict adherence is very important. And then also of great importance, remember, mark allocated to learners' responses must correlate with the mark allocation of the question. If a question carries 2 marks, we will not expect a situation where a learner gets 3 marks. Then this will really be a serious issue. So all that we say here, let's be accurate, let's focus, and let's uphold these principles that we shall be using as we mark. Now, the third aspect, I'll just take you through the structure of the question paper quickly. Now, the question paper has got 3 sections. Section A, it's about a reading comprehension text, which is, of course, a fable. Now, this type of question here, that is section A, has various question types. Some questions require learners to construct their own responses. Some questions are MCQ, which means multiple choice type of questions. And then other type of questions will be OEQ, which is open-ended questions. And the total for that section is 19 marks. Section B has got 3 categories. It comprises visual literacy, language in context, and summary. Visual literacy comprises 5 marks, language in context, 30 marks, and then the summary, 6 marks, and the total for that section is 41 marks. Section C, it is writing, and in this type of writing, it will be a transactional piece. To be specific, it's a friendly or an informal letter, the total mark of which is 15. Now, the grand total for the whole paper, if you add all the 3 sections, is 75 marks. So I believe now you have an overview of the paper. You also know what type of questions you are going to encounter. And now, let's start with the real business. We are now going to look at the question paper, the questions, as well as the memorandum, the expected answers. Now, it is very important that before we mark, we should have familiarized ourselves with the contents of the paper, the texts, the questions, as well as the responses as we mark. Now, let's get straight to business. We are now going to look at our question paper and the memorandum. Now, there is the question paper. I'm not going to go through the instructions. Learners did that yesterday when they were writing. Now, there is our section A, the comprehension text, which is a fable. Just maybe to read one paragraph there, I'll take the second paragraph just to remind you of some of the contents in here. The crow was pleased because she loved to be flattered. I'm sure your voice is even more beautiful than your feathers, said the jackal. Won't you sing a song for me? Oh, queen of the birds. The crow was so pleased she could hardly sit still. So goes the text up to the end of that page. Now, the next page, page 2, it is the first question. And remember, these questions are based on the very text we have just seen now. Now, the first question is actually a multiple choice type of a question. And each question has got its instruction. Now, the question says, circle the letter of the correct answer. That instruction is very, very important. Now, the question itself says, why did the jackal praise the crow? There are 4 options given. Now, with a multiple choice question, it is easier to mark because all that learners have to do there is to circle the symbol of the correct answer. And there it is given in the memorandum. The correct answer for that question is C, symbol C. Now, also note, in the memorandum, it is not only the symbol that is indicated. Even the whole response, the whole statement of that symbol is captured. Now, what does that mean? The instruction says a learner must circle. But in case a learner did not circle, but wrote the full statement, you need to credit the learner, provided it is the correct one. In this case, some learners will just write C, which is what we are looking for. You just mark C as the correct one. Some will not write C, will just write the statement, which is he wanted the cheese to drop. So in that case, you still credit a learner. Note, it is 1 mark. In fact, all multiple choice questions are worth a mark. So please note, it is very important. The second question, also multiple choice question. Remember, I'm not going to read the instructions for the multiple choice question. All that they have to do is circle. So that instruction is common to all multiple choice questions. So I'll just go to the question of that question number. Then the question says, why was the crow pleased at first? And the 4 responses, possible responses are given. And the correct answer for that question, if you look at your memorandum, it is symbol D. And like we discussed earlier on, the alternative might be she enjoyed being flattered by the jackal. So as long as that is the correct answer given, please credit the learner. Now, you are also reminded, if you check your memorandum, that for this question, that is the reading comprehension section, all that we are interested in is the comprehension, the understanding of the learners. How well did they understand the text that they read? Well, here and there, learners will have errors in terms of spelling, language, and other items like punctuation. Now, although learners might have those errors here, we are not going to penalize them. But what is important, do indicate them without penalizing the learner, because as language teachers, whenever learners commit errors in language, we need to correct that. So just indicate, but do not penalize them. As long as the response is sensible, is relevant, makes sense, is appropriate to the question, then grade it. Let's move on. Question 3. Question 3, if you look at it, it is actually a constructed response. A learner is expected to construct his or her own response. The question says, after the crow lost her cheese, what else did she lose? So here we expect a constructed response by the learner. Now here is the possible response. If you check the memorandum, the appropriate answer there is self-confidence. That is the expected answer for 1 mark. The next question, it's a multiple choice question. Question 4, what is the lesson of the story? And 4 possible answers are given. And this is the expected answer, symbol A, or alternatively, never trust a flatterer. So that is the expected answer also for 1 mark. Question 5. Question 5 is also a constructed response. A learner must come up with his or her own response. And the question there is, what is the best title for the story? Now, this is a question or a response that will need a learner to come up with a title that is related to the contents of the text that they have read. And we assume at this stage that they read with understanding. Now, a possible response to that question is the jackal and the crow, or any suitable title relevant to the text. This is very, very important. A learner may not give the exact title, but it should have something to do with a jackal and the crow. Some learners might even go further to qualify. For instance, they might say the cunning jackal and the foolish crow. So that is also acceptable. It is relevant in that context. And any other relevant title will be acceptable for 1 mark. So that is very, very important, ladies and gentlemen. Moving forward, question 6. Question 6, also constructed response. Give 2 examples of sentences the jackal said to flatter or sweet talk the crow. So here, very important, 2 sentences, because the question is worth 2 marks. So it means 1 sentence will be worth a mark. Now let's go to the memorandum. This question, there are actually more than 2 responses in the text itself, but all that we need will be only 2 from those. Now these are those examples. If you check your memorandum, one of them is, he flattered her looks. So it should be something to do with how the crow looked like, the looks. The second sentence, he flattered her voice. So it is something that must do with the voice of the crow. Another one might be, he flattered her eyes. In other words, the jackal flattered the crow's eyes. So it should be something to do with the eyes of the crow. Another one, he flattered her feathers. So it should be something to do with the feathers of the crow. Now there, as we have indicated, any 2 sentences that address any 2 of the above characteristics. So that is very important. So it will be 1 mark each. It will be 1 mark each. Only 2, remember? Only 2 sentences for 2 marks there. Right. Question 7. Also a constructed response, where learners are expected to explain why the jackal wanted the crow to sing for 2 marks. So they definitely need to explain. Now here it is very important. We have to really make sure that we get the gist of the question. They have to explain why the jackal wanted the crow to sing. So that is the essence of the question. Now the expected response is she would have to open her beak, her mouth in other words, to sing, and then the cheese would fall to the ground. So now there are the two focus areas there. Opening the beak, some learners might say the mouth, it will be acceptable. And then the second mark will go to the cheese would have to fall. So please be careful there when you mark this question. We have also even explained there to say 1 mark is awarded if a learner indicates that the jackal wanted the crow to open her beak. The other mark is allocated if the learner indicates that the cheese would fall to the ground. So if a learner just only indicates opening the mouth, then it will be 1 mark. If the learner did not go further to say the cheese had to fall, then another mark will be forfeited. Opening the mouth, 1 mark. The falling of the cheese, the second mark, for full 2 marks for that question. So this is very, very important. Moving forward, question 8. Question 8 also is it's actually a question that requires learner's response. It is an open-ended type of a question. Now, open-ended question means it will have 2 responses, either on the negative side or on the positive side, where they will have to say yes if it is positive and no if it is negative. And for both sides, there should be a reason, because the question says, was it fair that the jackal got the cheese? Give a reason for your answer. So there we will expect some learners to be positive, some will be negative, of course, with reasoning. Now, these are the possible responses. Now, for those learners who will respond negatively by saying no, we expect them to say, no, the jackal cheated, tricked the crow in order to get the cheese through flattery. So that would be the reason to say it was not fair. In other words, the jackal did not use straightforward ways, used underhand method. So that will be another group of learners. Those who would agree, who would say yes, it was fair, they would say yes, the jackal was smart and therefore deserved the cheese more than the crow. You know, the tricks that the jackal used might be used as a way of being clever. So for some learners, they would regard that as being fair, using your own tricks or wisdom, if you may put it that way. So that is very, very important. But when you mark this type of a question, it has got other requirements and prerequisites for learners to earn full marks there. Let's go through that. No marks should be allocated if the learner only answered yes or no. And again, no marks should be allocated if the reason given is not relevant to the text. And then another instance where you are not going to allocate marks, if a learner says no, no marks should be allocated if the learner only wrote a reason and did not answer yes or no. In other words, did not indicate his or her side. So the bottom line is yes and then a reason. Then that can be allocated full marks if the reason is appropriate from the text. Or no and then the appropriate reason. So if only a reason and the learner didn't say yes, it was fair or it was not, by saying yes or no, unfortunately, no marks. So here we have to be very careful, ladies and gentlemen. But by all means, what it means is, if there is no yes, no, you don't even have to read the reason. Because anyway, if there's no yes or no, there's no way that a learner is going to get a mark for that, regardless of the reason. So once the starting point will be yes or no, then you can start to consider the response. So that is very, very important. Moving forward, question 9 is a multiple choice type of question. And by this time now we are familiar with the technique of marking a multiple choice type of a question. Now the question there is, what is meant by the word closey in the following sentence? This is quoted directly from the text. How closey are your feathers? Remember, this was the jackal. Now there are 4 possible answers, and there can only be one. And the correct one there, if we look at our memorandum, it is option B, which is shiny. So some learners will write the word and not the symbol, but the correct one there is either the symbol B or the word shiny. So hopefully by now we are in the mood. Now we have seen how the questions have been constructed, and I hope we are following. Question 10. It's also a multiple choice question. Let's look at the question. Why did the crow agree to sing a song for the jackal? 4 possible answers, and of course there can only be one correct answer there, and the correct answer for that one is option D, or the statement, the jackal said she had a beautiful voice. 1 mark. So that should be fairly easy to mark. Question 11. Question 11 is a constructed response by the learners where they are expected to fill in the missing word to complete the sentence. And there is the sentence, in exchange for your cheese, I will give you good. So they are expected to quote that word from the text directly. And the only correct answer there, it's the word advice. If you check response 11. And then also note there, mark only allocated if the word is spelled correctly. Now the word advice, remember, can be spelled in different ways. If it is spelled with an S, in terms of our South African English, it is a verb. If it is spelled with a C, it is a noun. So once it is spelled with an S in our South African English, it will mean it is a verb, and then it will be inappropriate there. So please be careful. 1 mark also for that response. Moving forward, question 12, multiple choice question. And the question says, what was the biggest mistake the crow made? There are 4 possible answers given to that, and there can only be one correct answer. And the only correct answer there, it is symbol A, or she trusted the jackal, for 1 mark. Also question 13, it's a multiple choice type of question. And the question is, why does the jackal call the crow queen of the birds? And then only one correct answer there. In this case, it will be option C, which is he wanted her to sing, for 1 mark. Question 14, also very important. It is also a multiple choice type of question, and for 1 mark also. And the question is, what does the quotation, the jackal flattered the crow, mean? There are 4 options, and the only correct one there will be option A, or the statement, he praised her more than was needed. So that is worth 1 mark. And then the last question for that section, it is question 15, and it is a constructed response type of a question. And the question here says, did the jackal like the crow singing? Give a reason for your answer. Now here you must be very careful. It is not an open-ended type of question. It's very tricky, it looks like, but it is not. Because when you look at our response on the memorandum, the response is no. The jackal wanted to cover his head with his paws to stop the horrible sound from entering his ears. That is the only response. Now, further on, be careful that this is what you need to take care of. This is the only acceptable answer. No marks should be allocated if the learner only answered yes or no, or no marks should be allocated if the learner only wrote a reason and did not answer yes or no. Although here we say yes or no. Of course, some learners would say yes, but we know yes here is not acceptable because this is not an open-ended type of a question. The only response that will be acceptable here is no with a reason, and the reason has been provided there. So it is very, very important. It will be for no, 1 mark, and then the reason, another mark. If only reason and the word no has not been indicated, unfortunately, a learner will forfeit both marks. So please take note of that. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of section A, a reading comprehension text worth 19 marks. So at the end of the day, if you count all your marks and the learner has got everything right 100%, it should be 19 and not more than that. And that takes us to the next section, which is section B. And section B is actually a group of various questions there. The first part of section B is actually visual literacy, a graph, to be specific, a bar graph. And then the second part of section B will be language in context, which is based on the text, hence language in context. And then the last part of section B will be summary. Okay, let's start with the first part of section B. But please note, in terms of questions, there is continuity. Although we have a different section here, section B, but in terms of questions, it is a continuation of section A. You remember the last question for section A, reading comprehension, was question 15. Now, section B starts with question 16, although it is a different aspect. Now, here, learners are expected to look at that graph and then interpret it accordingly. Now, the graph below shows the after-school activities of learners. Use the information to complete the table and answer the questions that follow. So these questions will be based on this graph, so our learners have to interpret it. Now, the first question on the graph, which is question 16, says, which activity do most learners spend time on after school? So they need to look at the bars. And of course, if you look at the bar, it should be visiting their friends. That is where most of the learners spend their time for 1 mark. And the next question, question 17, still based on the graph. Here, learners are expected to name the 2 activities that learners spend the same amount of time on. Looking at the graph, and of course, if you look at the graph, the 2 activities are playing sports and read. 1 mark for play sports, 1 mark for read. Now, also note, for questions 16, 17, 18, and 19, on the memorandum there, it is indicated, ignore spelling errors. So this is about interpreting the graph. Although learners might commit errors there, yes, you will indicate them, either by underlining them or some sort of indication, but do not penalize at this stage. Here we are only interested in their response, for them to be able to show us that they are able to interpret visual text. Now, question 18. Name the activity that the learners spend the least amount of time on. If you look at the graph, there's no doubt that our learners, according to that, spend the least time on computers. Now, their computers, if you check the graph, some learners might say use computers. If you check the graph there, yes, it is correct. Use computers, using computers, computers, yes, that should be credited. So remember here, we do not penalize for spelling errors or language errors here. Then question 19, what is the heading of the graph? They are expected to give the heading there. And of course, this is actually a bonus because if you check, the heading is reflected there on top of that graph. There is the heading. If you check it, there it is there. And of course, even the memorandum also indicates that. Question 19, there it is. After school activities for 1 mark. And that is the end of visual literacy text, the graph. So the graph has only 4 questions. Now from question 20 onwards, we are now going to deal with language in context. So question 20 onwards, it is language in context. And our context in this case will be that text that we had at the beginning of the paper, the crow and the jackal. Okay, now here learners are going to be subjected to various language aspects, parts of speech, and so on. Now let's get to business. Question 20, which is the first question for language in text in context. Here the learners are expected to use the word in brackets to join the 2 sentences. So in simple terms, they have to use that word as a conjunction to join the 2 sentences. Now, this is the response that we expect from our learners. The correct answer there is the crow and the jackal loved cheese. That is the appropriate response. However, some learners might write it differently. If you check the second one there, the crow loved cheese and the jackal loved cheese. Now this actually sounds awkward, but now at least there a learner will have a mark for that one, not full 2 marks. So if the learner has written that one at the bottom there, please note it's only 1 mark that should be awarded to that one. Question 21. Remember now we are dealing with language in context. 21 says, rewrite the following sentence in the past tense, beginning with yesterday, the word yesterday. Now, in essence, if you look at that, the actual past tense that is actually targeted there, it is simple past tense or indefinite past tense. Now, the sentence that they need to consider there is, the jackal tricks the crow. And if you look at that sentence, it is a sentence in the simple or indefinite present tense, hence simple past tense. Now there they have to use the word yesterday to begin their sentence. Now if you begin that sentence with yesterday, it will automatically change to simple past tense if it is correctly changed. And the correct response there is, yesterday the jackal tricked the crow. Now the verb tricked is very, very important there. If you check, it is even underlined and it is in bold. So that is very, very crucial. Let me also indicate, if you look at the question paper, you will see that okay, that is question 22. Yes, question 22 is about plural. where they are expected to give the plural of the underlined word. Now the underlined word, it is that word crow in that sentence. And the full sentence is, the jackal thought that he was very clever when he tricked the crow. Now because here it is only one word that is required. That is why they are given a shorter line there. But what some learners will do, they will rewrite the whole sentence. It does not matter, as long as at the end that word crow is correctly written in plural form. Please give a full mark. And let's check. Always refer to the memorandum. There it is, crows with an S. So that is very, very important. Okay, moving forward. Question 23, it has got two sub-questions, to be 23.1 and 23.2. But the item that is tested there is correct punctuation, where learners are expected to rewrite the following sentences using the correct punctuation. The first sentence that they need to punctuate is, why is the crow special? So that in itself is a question. So automatically we will have to look for a question mark. And of course, the use of the capital letter at the beginning of a sentence. Now the conventions of punctuation. Now if you look at the memorandum, there is W, underlined, bolded. Remember it's at the beginning of the sentence, and if rightly indicated, 1 mark should be given to the learner. And then, of course, a question mark at the end of that statement, because it is actually a question. So it must be followed by a question mark. So 1 mark for W capital letter, 1 mark for the question mark. And then, of course, there we have indicated capital W and question mark at the end. Now, another question, punctuation. It is 23.2. The crow loved cheese, chocolate, and seed. And then here we are looking at, there should be 3 punctuation marks there, because that one is worth 3 marks. So it will be 1 mark per punctuation mark. And the correct response there, it is T, because it is at the beginning of the sentence, capital T, for 1 mark, and then a comma at the end of cheese, because a number of items are listed there. So there's a comma. If correctly placed, a tick, and then of course at the end of that sentence, because it's a statement, it should be a full stop. So there are your 3 marks, 1 per punctuation mark. Okay, now moving on. Question 24. Remember, we are busy, this is language now. So we are looking at various parts of speech, items in language, grammar. So here learners are expected to underline the correct preposition. So that instruction is important. They don't rewrite, they just underline. They have to draw a line under the correct response. Now they are given 2 options between brackets, and let's look at the sentence. The crow held seed in or over her beak. So there they have to underline, and the correct answer to that, if you look at your memorandum, it is in. In other words, they should underline the word or the preposition in and not over. Now what happens if a learner has underlined both? In other words, the line covers both ways. Then it means it is incorrect, because you are not sure which one the learner underlined. So you have to be very careful. And then also note, some learners may not underline, although there we say they must underline. Some may not underline. They may just simply write the correct word on top of those 2 in brackets. So what is important is, as long as we have some indication as to which one is appropriate, we must give full mark. So that is very, very important. So it is worth 1 mark. Now we move on to the second one, still under prepositions, 24.2. The cheese fell either up or onto the ground. Now there we have to be very careful. If you look at those prepositions in between, it is up and then we have on and to. It's like we have actually 3. It will be up and then on its own and then to on its own. That is not the case. Up is 1 and then on to. It is a phrasal preposition. So if a learner only underlines to there or on without underlining on to or up, then we are not going to allocate marks. Let's look at the memorandum. Let's look at our memorandum. Our memorandum indicates on to. That is the phrasal preposition that must be underlined. So please be careful there. It is a phrasal preposition for 1 mark. Question 25. We are now dealing with the opposites, antonyms. Now here, they have to write those opposites of the underlined words. So there are the underlined words indicated. They must just write their responses in the spaces provided. Now, very important, this question is important. If you look at the underlined words, they are in a particular tense. These are actually the verbs in certain tenses. So that is very, very important. And to be specific, verbs in past tenses. So when you come to the antonyms of such, even the antonyms that are written should still be in the same tense. Let's look at the response. For closed, which is a verb, then it should be opened. So note, closed, opened, not open, then it is wrong. For lost, we are looking for found, not find. So that is very, very important there. So opened because it is closed, and then found, not find, because it is lost. It's not lose. Very important. Now question 26. Here they are expected to write a word that has a similar meaning, that is a synonym to the underlined word. There is the word underlined for them, beautiful. So we are looking for the synonym of beautiful. Now let's look at the response there, 26. There we have given a number of options because the word beautiful has got a number of other similar words with the same meaning. Pretty, lovely, stunning, handsome, attractive, gorgeous, any of the above or any suitable synonym, like fabulous, in that context for 1 mark. So if the learner writes more than 1 answer, only mark the first answer given. All subsequent given answers should be ignored, like in that example. Here we have given them a number of ways there. Say the learner also does the same. We'll give pretty, lovely, stunning. You don't mark all of them, only 1, the first one if it's correct, and then ignore the rest for 1 mark. Now moving forward, question 27. 27, still language, remember, in context. There we are. Now here, learners are expected to underline the correct word in brackets to complete the sentence. Now if you look at that, here it's about comparison. So they must choose the appropriate word there for comparison, comparative degree. And the sentence is, the female crow had brightest eyes than the male crow. Now this is comparative, So it should definitely be brighter. It should definitely be brighter because we compare two items there. Now if you check your memorandum, 27, it is brighter, nothing else. So also note, should some learners not underline but write brighter on top? Please take that as an appropriate response for 1 mark. Now 27.7, also a comparison. The jackal is the fastest animal in the forest. So that is superlative degree because it's more than 2 items compared there. And definitely the answer there should be fastest because that's superlative and nothing else for 1 mark. So please take note. Now question 28. Question 28, it's about homophones, and please also remember homonyms, homophones, let's not confuse them. Now in this case, the learners are expected to write 2 sentences to show 2 different meanings of the word back. The word back in different contexts or meanings. So that is very, very important. Now what is important here, if you check your memorandum, we have given you an example there. The first sense means he hurt his back in the accident. So that will refer to the part of the body, the spine. So we need that context there. And then the second meaning, the dog came back after 3 days. So it indicates that came back did not go forever. You know, you go and you come back. So that is the context or the meaning we are looking for. 1 mark per meaning because that question is worth 2 marks. Now note there, any 2 sentences that clearly show the difference in the meaning of the word back. Spelling to be taken into consideration when allocating marks. So this is a language question. So here we are very strict. Spelling, language, everything must be 100% correct for a learner to earn full marks there. Question 29. Here learners have to underline the correct word in brackets to complete each sentence. Now if you look at the nature of those sentences, it's all about concord. It's all about the correct concord, the agreement between subject and verb. Now let's look at 29.1. The jackal do or does not want the cheese. So here the subject, singular. So it goes without saying. It should be a singular verb there that indicates the correct concord. And there we are. It is does. So the learners there have to underline does. But also remember, if they did not underline, they rewrote the word does on top, it's fine, as long as we have an indication. But remember, if they have underlined both, please, we cannot give a mark there. And then 29.2, still on concord. The crow were said to lose her cheese. So the subject there, also very important, singular subject. So the correct answer there should be was. Okay. Can see here now that our learners really have to stretch their minds to exercise their language competency in grammar. And what is good about this is that all these language items are in context. Now and then we refer to that text at the beginning of the question paper. Now question 30, it's once more giving the opposite, but this time gender. It's about gender of the underlined words. Now here, the opposite gender of mother in that sentence, of course, it should be father. There it is. Now, you must be very careful there. This is formal language. This is formal grammar. So dad there will not be appropriate because then it is informal. You know, if it was mom, yes, it will go with the informal gender, which is dad. But this one is mother, so it should only be father. So please be careful there. Okay, another one, the opposite gender of lion in that sentence. It should be nothing else but lioness. They must just add the suffix ess. Note it's 1 mark each there. It's 1 mark each. Moving forward. Question 31. It's also about tenses. They are expected to underline the correct form of the verb in brackets. So they will be given 2 verbs in brackets and they underline the correct one. Now 31.1. Yesterday the crow lands or landed on a branch. Of course, it should be landed, but let's check our memorandum. Yes, our memorandum agrees. It is landed. And then 31.2, tomorrow the crow will sang beautifully. Of course, the correct one there should be sing, and so says the memorandum, sing, for 1 mark there. Okay. Question 32. We are now going to change the word travel by adding a suffix or the ending from the list below. They are given a list of suffixes there, which they must use in the sentence or the sentence given below. And the sentence is, the crow was travel to her home. Now there, the word travel, there it is. They must add the appropriate suffix from the list there. And the correct one there will be ling, which means the full word will be traveling with ling, in other words, double L. Because if it is only 1 L, it means the learner will have used ing and not ling. So ling will make this travel double L. So that is very, very important. So it is double. So to play it safe here, you can even write out the word traveling to make sure that you will always remember it is double L, with double L. You can write it there, traveling with double L, so that you can always remember when you come to that. Okay, moving forward, question 33. Question 33, it is where they have to rewrite the word in brackets by adding the apostrophe. There is the apostrophe given, and there's the word in brackets. So that apostrophe must be placed appropriately here, so that the context of that sentence is correct. Of course, if you look at that sentence, the jackal stole the crow's cheese. In the context of that sentence, it should show possessive case. In which case, this is how we are going to do it. If you look at the memorandum, there is our apostrophe between W and S, a crow's cheese. So that is where the apostrophe must be placed. Remember, it must be placed on top, not at the bottom, because once it is at the bottom of W, between W and S, it is no more an apostrophe. So it must be up there where it is appropriately placed for 1 mark. Moving forward, question 34, it's also giving the opposite antonyms, but in this case, they must use prefixes to write the opposite or the antonym of the word happy. And if we use a prefix, there can only be one for that word, and it should be UN, which will be unhappy. Unhappy. So that is the prefix we are looking for. If a learner just writes UN without the word happy, it's fine. But some learners will write the full word unhappy. Please also give it a mark. It is still appropriate. Okay, we are now in the tune. I hope we are enjoying the flow of the questions now. Question 35. Identify the root or the base word from the underlined word. There is the underlined word, looked. So there learners have to identify the root or the base word of looked. Of course, there can only be one. The root there, it is look, without any suffix or prefix, just the word look. That is the base. It's a root word for 1 mark. And then question 36, here they have to choose the correct pronouns from the word box to complete the sentences. So they have been given a number of words there from which they have to choose. And let's look at the first question there, 36.1. This cheese belongs to me. It is, otherwise they must show possessive case there, which word will be appropriate. So the appropriate word is nothing other than mine. You know, it's me, so therefore it will be the cheese is mine. So that is the only one there correct. The second one, this nest belongs to them. So there's the key word them. In other words, it is, of course there can only be one, it is theirs. So that is the only correct one there. And that is the end of questions on language in context. It was quite a long one, but now we still continue with the question paper. The next question that we are going to look at now is a summary question. Question 37 on page 11. And let's turn to page 37, right at the top of page 11. You see there, this is what learners have to do. They have to read this passage below and then choose 6 reasons why birds sing. In other words, this text is about why birds sing. And of course, if you check the title there, it also says, why do birds sing? Now, learners have to write these reasons in point form. 6 reasons why birds sing in point form. Now, I must also point out that this is actually an information text. So far we have encountered 3 texts. The first one, reading comprehension, it was a non-fiction. It was a fictional text. The second one, it was a visual text, which is the graph, bar graph. Now this one, it is an information text, which learners have to summarize. This text is about nothing else but why birds sing. So it is a very straightforward text, and learners shouldn't really have a problem to read this on their own and even understand it. Now, the reasons why birds sing are given. I think they are explicit. We can read that on our own. But here are the reasons that are given. There are more than 6. If you read that text, there are more than 6 reasons, but we only need 6. And you can see there, they sing to find one another, is one. They warn others to stay away from their homes. They sing to talk. They show where they live. They sing to find a mate. They warn one another of danger. They sing when they are happy. So you can see there is more than 6, but any 6 of those for 1 mark each. So that is very important. But also note there, the main points may be in any sequence. So it doesn't mean that they have to follow one another like it is indicated here. One learner may start with, they sing when they are happy. It's fine. So the sequence here is not that important. What is important is the reason that learners have put forward there. And then you are also advised there 6 marks for 6 sentences. In other words, it is 1 mark per main reason or per sentence, which if it is relevant. There we are. We are almost nearing the end of the road. This is the last question now that we are going to look at. Section C. Section C. By the way, summary, because we are looking for 6 points there, should be 6 marks. So please note, summary is 6 marks. And that section will actually come to 41. Because remember, for language, it is 30 marks. If you check the marks for language, 30 marks. And then for visual literacy, if you check that graph, it's 5 marks. So that gives us 35. And now for this summary, it is 6 marks, and that now gives us 41 marks for that section. So that is very, very important. Now the last section and the last question, it is section C, and learners have to write. Now very, very important here. Learners have to write, okay, let me read it as it is. Write to your friend and tell him or her about the day you landed into trouble at school. Now here it is very important. We must underline the key concepts. We know for sure that they are going to write to a friend. So we know this should be a friendly letter, a letter to a friend, or an informal letter. Now this letter should be about the day you landed, not the days. It should be the events of one day, and it should be about the trouble that this learner landed into on that day, nothing else. So we know friendly letter about one day at school when this learner landed into trouble. And this learner is going to tell his or her friend in a letter. And what is also important here, learners are given criteria that are going to be used to assess them. Because if you look at the criteria there, write at least 4 well-linked paragraphs. So they should write between 80 and 100 words. So that's how long the letter should be. And in that letter, the letter format is important. So we will look at the format of a friendly or an informal letter. So format is important. And lastly there, the correct content. So it means it should be relevant. So that is what is referred to correct content. It should be relevant to this day there, trouble on a particular day. And of course, correct spelling, punctuation, and grammar will be considered. So here is all about the criteria that will be used when these learners are assessed. And let's check whether the assessment tool also agrees with the criteria provided to the learners. Now on the last page of your memorandum, page 4, there is the marking rubric for that writing piece. Section C, writing. There is the rubric. Now the criteria, if you look at the criteria on the question paper, we said it should be about the format. And let's check the rubric. Yes, the first criterion there is format. So it agrees with that. And then of course, the question paper said content, correct content. Let's check whether content is there. Yes, there is content on the assessment tool. And then of course, learners were also made aware that they should make use of correct spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Now let's check whether the rubric also contains the criteria. Yes, spelling, punctuation, language structure, and use, that is grammar. So precisely, the learners have to follow the criteria, then we are going to assess them accordingly. Now, if you look at the marking rubric, it is very, very important that we do not give learners PT marks. The mark that the learner earns or is allocated should be deservedly allocated to the learner. A learner should deserve the mark. So that is very, very important. And also, very important, I want to indicate there is this general tendency, especially when it comes to content, where now we realize that the learner is off the topic, is irrelevant. Most of us normally just strike a line through without reading that. That is inappropriate. All that we need to do is we read every piece, regardless of its relevance or irrelevance. Only after reading it, then can we allocate marks following the criteria given. So each criterion must be given marks. As you can see there, maximum mark for format, it will be 5 marks. It will be 5 marks. And then maximum for language, structure, and punctuation spelling, also 5 marks. The same applies to content. Maximum mark, 5 marks. So the total mark will be 15. So please, you need to make sure that you allocate marks accordingly, according to each criterion. That is why when you look at the back of your question paper, page 13, at the back of your question paper, page 13, we have given you that table there so that you precisely allocate marks per criterion as indicated in the rubric. There's your format. If a learner has got 5 out of 5, you will indicate it there. For language, spelling, punctuation there. And then for content there. So this is very, very important. And I hope this will also make your marking easier when you come to the writing piece. What is also very important when you mark a writing piece, it is very important that as you read along, indicate where errors have been committed by a learner. Because if you just read the piece without indicating any errors, it will be difficult for you at the end to formulate an appropriate opinion. If you have indicated, underlined, spelling, language, irrelevant, when you come to the end, at least, you will be able to say, in terms of this criterion, this is what the learner has done. So it will assist you a great lot. More often than not in the past, we have come across instances where a piece was just as blank as nobody else could have imagined. It was never endorsed, no indication. So in that case, then how will you really account for the marks that we have given if you haven't really endorsed the piece? So please, it is also helpful for you as a marker. Indicate errors there that learners have committed, then at the end, it will assist you a great deal. Now, briefly, I just want to go through that marking rubric, the various levels. For format, it should be, if a learner gets 0 to 1 mark, look at what is expected there. Either a learner writes very limited or has very limited adherence to the letter format, no address, salutation, or ending, in other words, the structure, no paragraphs, then for format only, that is the mark that you may allocate to that learner. Only format, look at that. For a learner to earn 2 to 3 marks, it should be partial adherence to the format. Not all the elements of the format are adhered to. Partial, some of them. Has at least, say, an address. At least there is one element there. Has at least one short paragraph. It is one of the elements in that. So at least there you can give 2 to 3 marks. Now for a learner to earn 4 marks there, good adherence to the format. Now good will mean fairly appropriate length. Remember the length there, 80 to 100 words, about 4 paragraphs as indicated in the question paper. You remember at least 4 well-linked paragraphs, 80 to 100, that is the appropriate length. So keep that in mind. At least 3 complete sentences per paragraph. address, salutation, and ending are present but incorrectly structured. So although they are there, the structure is not correct. At least you can give 4 marks there. Then for full marks for format, complete adherence to format, appropriate length, 100% in other words here. Address, salutation, conclusion, paragraphing, everything is perfect there. So that is as far as the format is concerned. Now the language part of it, for a learner to earn 0 to a mark there under language, completely inappropriate structure and tone for that. Remember, with tone here, it is a friendly letter. So we expect the tone also to reflect that. This is a letter to a friend. Now, weak sentence structure with no subject and verb. You know, sentences are just hanging. It's like phrases. They don't have subject and a verb. Numerous spelling errors, grammatical and punctuation errors, you know, non-ending sentences, no full stops, or if they are placed inappropriately. Where there is supposed to be a comma, it's not placed, you know. So this is what a learner will deserve if these are found to be the case with that learner. For a learner to earn 2 to 3 marks, inappropriate structure and tone, but incomplete sentences. Sentences are there but incomplete. Few grammatical and spelling punctuation errors. They are there but they are not dominant. They are few. You can pick them up here and there. At least 2 sentences, mostly without error. At least 2. Others will have errors, but at least 2 without errors. So please be on the lookout there. Appropriate structure and tone for a learner to get 4 marks. Complete sentences. Few grammar. Now, complete sentences will mean subject, verb, where an object is also required. That is a full sentence. Okay. Now, few grammatical, spelling, and punctuation errors. At least 4 sentences written with subject and verb. Whereas here, at least 2. So you can see there is progression now. For full marks there under language structure, highly appropriate structure and tone, variation of sentence types. You know, remember sentence types, we have simple sentences, we have complex sentences, we have compound sentences. So a learner here shows competency in the use of various sentence types. Good use of language, spelling and punctuation marks with no spelling errors. You know, this learner is really good in this aspect. At least 5 or more sentences written complete with subject and verb. Then a learner there will earn full marks, 5. And the last one, the last criterion, content, 0 to 1 mark, completely off the topic. That is irrelevant. The learner is totally irrelevant. Instead of writing about the day, trouble happened to a friend at school, a learner writes about sports day in a city. So that's totally off the track. The purpose not achieved at all. Once this is irrelevant, of course, the purpose will not have been achieved. So a learner there, 0 to 1 mark. Then 2 to 3 marks there under content. A learner mentions the topic with no adherence to it. Will say, yes, it's about a friend, about the trouble at school. The contents will then be different. So at least only indication at the beginning, and then, because the learner might say, my friend, I'm going to tell you about the day I had trouble at my school. That learner has just mentioned it. And from there, the content is totally different. So that is the case where at least you can give 2 to 3 marks. Then 4 marks there. The learner adheres to topic with minor deviations. Okay, here and there, some items might not be directly related to the topic, but very few of them. But all in all, the learner achieves the purpose partially in terms of the content. Then 4 marks and then 5 marks, full marks there. Complete adherence to topic, achieves purpose fully. So that is about the writing, ladies and gentlemen, and very important, as you mark, please, now and then, you will be reflecting, indicating the learner's marks on the question paper here. But very important, keep on referring to the rubric. look at the criteria now and then, now and then, now and then. That is very, very important. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I think now we are about to conclude our session, and it has been a fruitful day, I believe, and I hope that you are now well equipped. And let me take this opportunity now as I close the presentation to wish you well, not luck, but success. Enjoy the marking. It is Leswara signing off. Thank you one and all.